So with us right now, we've got Dwayne Alexander. Dwayne, you are the co-founder of Alexander PR. Alexander PR in New Zealand, you're one of the big dogs. And you've done amazing things, not just, of course, in New Zealand, but globally. You're a very, very respected name in the world of public relations. Listen, it's really an honor to have you on. So if people can't tell, I'm fanboying a little bit. Dwayne and his crew do amazing work. And I'll just put this out as well. You can find Dwayne and his team at alexanderpr.co.nz. So Dwayne, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Josh. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate it. It's a long, long flight between New Zealand and the US. It's quite short with the internet, right?
Yeah, that helps things a bit. So just again, maybe just kind of give an overview of what Alexander PR does.
Yeah, we're a full service reputation agency. Actually, half of our business is issues and crisis and the more complicated legal stuff, helping companies and CEOs from across the world and in New Zealand and Australia protect their reputation when things come knocking at the door that they don't really want. And it's interesting because we're a small team in global standards, but a very talented team that's been together for probably 10, 12 years. And many of our customers have been with us for 10 or 12 years as well. So it was especially sweet when we've been given invitations across the world to go and receive awards in Singapore and in London and in LA and in Washington, DC, all in the last 3 or 4 months, which has been a true, it's sort of a blessing, you know, in some respects. We're very grateful for it. What we have realized during that process is many CEOs, if they want to be successful, have to become passionate about the social good. And in fact, the social license to operate has become critical for companies across the world, not just because of Gen Z or because of Gen Y, but because actually it's a real reason to differentiate your business across the world, not just with media, not just with governments, but actually with consumers, your consumers.
So specifically, are we talking about being engaged in social good campaigns, or are we talking about being mission and purpose focused?
I think it's the latter. Unless you have it ingrained in everything you do, from your management planning sessions through to how you hire your staff, it can be seen as window dressing, you know? And in fact, the word campaign to me is sort of a misnomer, because a campaign indicates that it's a short, sort of maybe something you do on an annual basis. Whereas if something is ingrained in your culture, you are going to make a difference. I mean, New Zealand, for example, the government is starting to look at procurement and wellness and well-being, and whether companies can fulfill certain criteria and help the economy, the culture, and society. And if your company does good, then perhaps going forward, it may be on the procurement lists more than somebody else. So that is something that I believe will resonate around the world. We can't rely on governments to create positive change alone anymore, nor can you, the church or communities. It's the smart companies around the world which are saying, well, let's live, eat, and breathe something and make a difference.
So you mentioned something about, you know, being mission purpose focused, but then you talked about winning a government contract. And I think a lot of people might have the idea that stuff doesn't matter, but that government contracts and bids are given completely objectively based on price and ability to do the job. And that's all that matters.
I think governments will change, and you can see it around the world. The rule book has been thrown out, really. It's very hard to predict how people will react. And, you know, leadership is about persona, personalities, and actually the people that get the attention of these personalities, be they community groups, companies from around the world, are the ones that are going to actually change the agenda. You know, you can look at Congress, you can look at governments around the world, but actually it can be a single idea from a group of teenagers, which goes across the world in seconds, if not minutes or hours, and can change legislation. You know, from our little corner of New Zealand, one of our clients, Andrew Barnes, did the 4-day week initiative, where he said people should really be working less, should be remaining productive in the 4 days and paid for 5. And we've seen that resonate around the world. In fact, Russia is looking at it in their legislation. In the UK, the Labour Party is also looking at it seriously as well.
Wow.
Funny enough, when I was in America, in DC last week, I got a lot of wry smiles looking at me saying, well, you know, we love our work here in the US. And, however, when I stood up and did my acceptance speech, and many of the US citizens around the room realized that actually it's good for family, it's good for the planet, it's good for mental health, they seem to change their tune a little bit as well. So we love work. We all, you know, anybody, Josh, you live, eat and breathe your business, and many of your listeners do as well. But it's about creating a positive loop as well, and not just doing work for work's sake.
Yeah. So obviously, so that's something that you've been involved in, but it's interesting, you know, so I'll just, you know, ask you this question is why focus on that, and why is that good for business? Help me connect the dots there.
Well, in terms of this specific initiative, the 4-day week initiative is all about productivity. You know, Andrew read an article in The Economist, for example, that said, on average, if you've got 50 staff, you know, 60 to 70% of their time is spent on Facebook and Instagram and phoning the plumber and, you know, doing a whole lot of things. And that's, you know, that's life, okay? Essentially, what we really need to do is ensure that there's not a presenteeism in the building, and that the culture is all about productivity, and that essentially you're focusing on the right things. And that's what that campaign is about. But it's not just about that campaign. I mean, we've got clients, Sudesh Jinjawala, who essentially for 10 years has spoken about accessibility and sustainability. And, you know, him and his family have been picking up rubbish around Lake Rotorua for many years before it became popular and popularist. You know, he's recently got rid of all the plastic, you know, plastic straws in his business. And it's about actually focusing on little things that amount to a lot for the community around you, and not waiting around for the government to create legislation or the church to come in and feed the poor people. You know, it's about finding something that you're passionate about and going out there and creating a meaningful difference. One of the winners was a wastewater beer. I think it was Carlsberg, Sweden. Can you imagine that? And, you know, it's selling well. It was number 7 in the world. Our initiative was number 8 in the world out of 70 countries and 5,500 entries. So, you know, the analysis that we've done, you know, on the long playing back is it's not enough to live, eat and breathe and have purpose, but it's also about being able to communicate it as well. And this is almost 40% of the job, because unfortunately you do have a lot of excellent CEOs and founders who will hide their light under a bushel, and they'll just continue to do what they do. And they don't actually realize that actually if they extended and told the world a little bit about it, they could actually do even more good, you know. But that's true. That's true. Sometimes they're a little bit shy.
Yeah. And explain a little bit more about that, because, you know, we run into this issue with people that, you know, they feel like they're just going to be bragging and boasting, and they're going to feel like it's inauthentic to say, oh, look at us, look at the good things that we're doing. Go into that a little bit more, would you?
It's a very real problem, and especially in New Zealand, where, you know, people don't like to talk about success in many respects. And it's a constant challenge that we have with very successful CEOs who really just, you know, don't do it for the limelight. And we have to find very valid reasons to get them on in front of a camera or in front of a microphone to talk about what they do. But generally the way we do it is because if they do go down the road of talking about what they do in a more profound way, it actually can amplify the good that they do. So many ultimately will cross the line and start to do a little bit more public awareness about what they do if they really truly believe that it's going to help more people, more communities. You know, and what we tend to say is, you know, take it one step at a time. You know, first there is a journey that every CEO has. Tell your own personal story, because it's going to attract other funding. It's going to attract other supporters across your market and in the world, people who are equally interested in what you're doing as well. And you'll be able to change the world much faster and amplify what you're doing.
Now, in your work, where you're doing a lot of work with crisis communication, reputation management, I bet you would hope that many of your prospective clients would be doing this work ahead of time, because it can help a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, human nature is such that we all believe that it'll never happen to us, you know. So many CEOs, they would either go through the classical, do a few hours of media training, develop a booklet, put it in the little library, and then put it away and not think about it for, you know, a number of years. Unfortunately, that just doesn't cut it. And it shouldn't cut it for boards either. You actually need a regular, almost a fire drill type thing in terms of practicing. You know, we've just had a major catastrophe in the middle of Auckland in New Zealand, where the Sky City Convention Center, which has been built, burst into flames, you know, and it was only halfway built. And it crippled the city for days and days. And you could argue that perhaps the right crisis and issues protocols weren't in place, because it was sort of hours and hours before people knew what was happening, you know. But coming back to, you know, understanding what to do in a crisis, you need to have gone through the thinking before you're actually in the crisis in order to succeed. So you need an idea of who the stakeholders you will need to reach out at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening when everybody's doing other things. How will you reach them? You know, is it via text? Is it via telephone, by email? You know, are you going to send messages out? You know, there's a whole lot of pre-work that needs to be done in an issue and crisis. And also, the successfully managed crises will take sometimes 3 or 4 years to turn around and put something back into the community, you know, where the ill has happened. So it's a long slog. You may turn around the initial crisis, but then there's the reputational damage, and then there's also the reparations that needs to happen to make sure that the things that have gone wrong are bettered or improved.
And so, Dwayne, in terms of one thing that I've heard as well is generationally, and I think both you're seeing both cultural moves toward an expectation that there's more to a company than just its products and services, that there's a soul to that company. And so I think culturally, we're seeing this more and more, but also from the data I've seen, generationally, there's an expectation in terms of, you know, companies that have the values and purpose and, you know, the involvement in making the world better. You know, folks in their 20s, I don't want to say just millennials, but I think that, you know, just anyone in that age and below, it's just the way that, you know, look, if I got the option between two different companies and one's just selling me a product and the other one's selling me a product, and it might be $1 or $2 more, but I get to be a part of something. I think we're seeing a lot of trends toward that second option. And I'm sure that's what you've seen as well.
Absolutely. All the research points to Generation Z, you know, driving that. You know, they're very idealistic, and rightly so. They're very ambitious for the planet and for their parents and their grandparents. But essentially, you know, they look for social proof, and companies that create the social proof in an authentic way are the ones that are winning. They're winning the awards, they're winning on the profit, the P&L as well. And in order to build social proof, it's about going out and asking your customers to tell you their stories. And it's the stories of the customers that are engaging your other customers and helping to change behaviors. So ultimately, it's not the flashy 80s style ad agency ad that's going to cut it anymore. It's the user-generated social media content that's been developed and yes, researched as well, because it's not enough to pay lip service and say that you're doing good. People in this, even Generation Z likes to see proof. And that social proof should come in the form of, have you done the research that shows that you're doing positive things in your market as well? So it's not enough to create stories. The stories have to be foundation, have a foundation in science and maths.
Yeah, terrific. Well, great. So, Dwayne, anything else that folks? I mean, you've done a lot of traveling around the world, and you've been heralded for your work in this space. Any other things on the horizons that all business owners and brand owners and personalities should take into consideration about where economies are going, where consumers are going, and where business is headed?
I think, the big thing for us is talent. We couldn't do what we do if we didn't have a very tight team who'd been with us for a long time and understood the vision and the values of what we're doing. The issue that businesses face around the world is there actually are a lot of opportunities around, and retaining top talent is going to be the big challenge of the next millennium, because there's so many options. And I think from a cultural perspective, we need flexible working. We need an ability for people to do good things in their lives and have a work, enjoy their work, and also have balance with the family as well. And whether you're American, from the UK or Russia, the future of work has to involve you have to be developing it in conjunction with your team, as opposed to just top down. And I think that's the biggest single thing. Artificial intelligence is around the corner. However, it's human beings ultimately that will define where we go in the next 10 years, not artificial intelligence.
Terrific. All right, Dwayne Alexander, you are the co-founder of Alexander PR, found on the web at alexanderpr.co.nz. Thank you so much. Very insightful. Again, business owners that are intending on being in business for quite some time, please pay very close attention. Maybe re-listen to this episode again to make sure that you get this message. And that, you lead with your why, you communicate your why, do good in the world and communicate that good. Dwayne, these are all amazing, very powerful lessons I think that business owners can take. So I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Our pleasure. Thank you for having me.